Hello again, students. Today we're going to look at chapter 14, markets for factor inputs. The past chapters we looked at market for output products. Now the focus is on market for inputs or markets for factors of production. The chapter will look into three different factor market structures: perfect competition, monopsony, and monopoly. And we'll start with the competitive factor market, 14.1. Now first we need to understand that demand for an input depends on the firm's level of output and cost of inputs. Okay, two things. So for instance, you have a factory and you want to decide you have a factory and one of your inputs is labor working in that factory. Okay, so demand for labor depends on demand for the output of that factory. For instance, if the output is telephones, so and the cost of the labor itself. Alright, so this is quantity and the cost of input. If this is labor, then it will be wages. Alright, so the decision making is essentially similar to output market, where we look at whether additional revenue from that additional input, okay, let's say labor, is it the same with the additional cost of adding that additional labor. If the additional revenue, the marginal revenue per unit of labor is higher, then we will employ more. But if it is less, then we should employ less labor. Okay, so the equilibrium is always at equal. That how much revenue you earn from adding that extra worker is the same as how much you have to spend in adding the extra worker. Okay, now let's look at the technical definition here. The MRP of labor is the marginal revenue which is change in R over change in output. This is the definition of marginal revenue, right? When you sell more output, you get more revenue. And the marginal product of labor is the change of output when you change the number of labor. Okay, so you can cancel and you will end up with change in R over change in L. So similar to how we defined just now, marginal revenue product being the additional revenue that you obtain by adding an additional input. Okay. Now, in a competitive output market, we have a unique situation where MR is equals to AR equals to P. So in this case, MRP of labor equals to MPL of labor, and instead of just MR, this is replaced with P. Okay. On the other hand, if this is a monopolistic competition, this is a PC, okay, but if it is a monopolistic competition structure, then MR is less than P, right? Because every time you want to add one more unit to be sold, you will have to reduce price, and therefore your marginal revenue declines more than the price. That's why you have the downward sloping. That's why you always have the the demand curve higher than the marginal revenue curve. Okay, so what happens here is that since MR is less than P, so you will find that the MPL curve, so the MR curve, now we have MRPL is MPL and MR, right? You can't use P here, you can't replace with P. So MR, you know, is downward sloping because of because of the relationship with the MR and P in monopolistic competition. MPL is also downward sloping. MR is downward sloping because of monopolistic market power. MPR is downward sloping because of, yes, diminishing marginal returns. Okay, so imagine you have two reasons why the MRPL will be downward sloping. Compared to in the perfect competitive market, MRPL is downward sloping simply because of MPL's diminishing marginal return, but price here is usually constant and is perfectly elastic. The market is like this. This one, the market okay. So that's the reason in figure 14.1 you see that the MRP of a PC is like this. And MRP of a monopolistic output market is far more steeper, because of the double downward sloping factors that's affecting that MRP curve. Okay. All right. So how do we maximize profit? I've shown just now, I think, how we maximize profit by using marginal revenue. Okay, so the consideration is marginal revenue, the amount of revenue brought by the additional input must be the same as the marginal cost of that additional input. Okay, and what is the marginal cost of the additional input? If I'm hiring another worker to work in my factory, my additional cost would be its wages. Okay, his or her wages. His or her wage. Right? So the MRP okay, the MRP will represent demand for labor, because the firm that's hiring the labor or hiring the input demands the labor because of its MRP value. Okay, so this is the firm buying labor or demanding labor. But supply, is wages, because this is the intention to sell, intention and ability to sell labor services. So this is by the labor, and this one is by the firm. Firm is buying the labor. Now, why is the supply curve drawn as a perfectly elastic supply? Because supply of labor here is in the PC market. So just like when you graduate, and there are many people graduating at the same time, the same season in June, looking for work, you will see that your supply for graduate labor is almost perfectly elastic, at least for that market. Okay, because there are so many of them that all of you will probably be price takers, not price makers. So therefore, you have a perfectly elastic kind of supply. Now, the supply curve can move up or down, okay, depending on the number of supply. So if you have more graduates coming in, see, or if you have more demand coming in, all of this will change. Yeah, the equilibrium. For instance, here we have an example where S2 will create, S2 lower wages, lower supply, then you will have in the same demand curve, then you will have this. All right.